Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's never easy, is it?
Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears, the circus shit show of broken down cars. I'm a little fired up today because about a week ago, I took my Prelude on a little vacation. I went up to the mountains, had a great time, but on the way up, the car was overheating. I thought, well, it's really hot and I'm on the grapevine, no big deal. I'll just push through it. Ran the heater. The car made it just fine. I'm okay with that. But on the way back, the fender liner decided to eat itself. Fell off the car halfway down the mountain. That was great. And then the CV axle tore itself apart and decided to fling grease all over the place. So I got a nice, beautiful mess underneath this car. I've already started to clean it up. But on the way to getting parts for this Prelude, I was taking my Jeep, right now my only running car, and that started making a horrible noise out the rear end. Awesome! So now I have to race against the clock to fix that car before the other car breaks. Meanwhile, I can't even afford to touch this. I mean, I have some parts and I can do some things with it, but really, this is actually the best part about this whole story. I can afford to do none of this. I don't know what I'm going to do. Some expenses came up that I had to pay for, and I'm pretty stuck for a while. To make things more entertaining, I have to buy a pretty expensive tool in order to do the suspension bushings on this car. Because if I'm going to take the suspension apart, I may as well replace the bushings. The best tool to do this is a hydraulic press. You go down to Harbor Freight, but it's about 150 bucks. So I've done some research on some alternative ways to release the bushings from the control arm, and we're going to try those out. I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to work out, but hey, when you're broke, what can you do? Let's take a look at what I did down here. I used all the new panel clips because I figured I have them. I may as well just use them. I did not have to do the tape trick to any of these, fortunately. That's not to say that the tape trick failed. I really do believe that it worked just fine. I think my mistake was up front. I think I didn't get it tucked away properly underneath the bumper and in here. I think it was hanging over the bumper around here. So when I was going really fast on the freeway, it popped itself out, and then the wind caught it and just pulled it out when I was going really fast. Another fun thing I noticed was my CV boot seems to be going. Oh, this is fun. Look, I did not tighten. Wow. How do I still have coolant? Maybe that's why I was overheating. Maybe I was losing coolant. I'll have to take a look at that. That's fun. I love when I do shit like that. Hi. You don't see my ugly face because you don't need to look at my ugly face. You need to look at the control arms. One of the methods that I've researched on the YouTubes was by some lunatic who suggested that you soak the control arms in gasoline. I have some old gasoline that had already gone bad, so I can't use it. So I figured, what the hell, I'll give this a try. He said soak it in gasoline for a couple of days. It'll start to eat away at the rubber. It'll break down any chemical bonds which it supposedly has with the metal. And you should be able to press it out with one of these. So I've got one of these. It's a Pulley Remover. And then I've got this guy here, which is just a giant hex socket that I don't even remember what I used it for. So the bushing itself is already kind of mangled because I tried just straight pulling it with the puller, and that didn't really work out. But this has been soaking for 2 days, so let's see what we can do. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. I don't think the gasoline trick really did any good. Neither did this pulley puller thing. All I did was mess up the rubber even more. And then I put a bunch of dents and scratches into the control arm itself. So this method definitely was not, I mean, I can say this is myth busted maybe. I do not like this, would not recommend. All right, first up, in a lens flare that would make J.J. Abrams proud, I'm going to show the new tool that I bought. It's a 20-ton hydraulic press, and while I ended up just kind of ruining everything with it, I'm going to keep it because I know this is going to be useful down the road. I know that a control arm isn't the only thing that I am going to ruin with this. So this is the control arm I took off the car. As you can see, I started to remove the bushings on both sides, and I did a little bit more on this side. Okay. The first thing I tried to do was soak the control arms in gasoline because some dude on the internet said you'll break down the rubber by soaking it in gasoline. That didn't work. I don't know how it could have worked for him, but congratulations if it did. So then I got this press, and so I'm just going to go through kind of my process here. How did I do this? I used a socket that was as close to the size of the sleeve as I could, which I cannot find anymore. It probably is just this one. And, you know, I had to position this thing in these little corners so that it would press through. And I pressed it in. Now, that actually worked. It removed the center of it. It did not remove the sleeve. And on this one, it actually went in just a little bit crooked, which is another really tough thing, even with a press. Getting this thing to go in square and to go in straight and to come out the other side straight is actually pretty difficult. That was my first challenge. So the socket went in sideways. It split the sleeve and left a nice gouge in the control arm itself. But undeterred by that, I had seen the advice of another guy on the internet. He took a hacksaw to it, and in fact, another mechanic that I've known who's been a mechanic for 20 years told me to use a hacksaw to cut these sleeves. So it's not bad advice, just you have to be extremely careful, because I cut a little bit more than the sleeve, a lot more than the sleeve. I cut into the control arm and ruined the control arm. So this thing is now trash, and I paid for that mistake. Literally. I got a new control arm. Well, I got another used control arm, and because I did not get the bushings in and will not get the bushings in until October, I am just going to put this thing right back in the car, put it back together, and I'm going to do the axle on the other side because I already have the axle. But I'm going to just call that a project. And then once I get the bushings in, I'm going to take the control arms out, take them to the machine shop, and they're going to take out the old bushings. And then I'll put in the new bushings myself, put the car back together, and all will be good. I want to talk a little bit about planning, preparation, and having a cool head when you're working on these projects. Because I don't know if you noticed, but I was a little bit fired up, a little bit passionate, maybe just a little bit pissed off about the fact that my Prelude broke again. The reality of it is that this is a 30-year-old car, and some of these parts I haven't touched in 15 years. And the reason why I touched them 15 years ago is because the car was 15 years old. Things wear out, things break. Yes, I know, that's a part of the adventure. I'm not telling you anything new. So right from the get-go, I don't know why it pissed me off so much. I guess it just came from the fact that I've been working on this thing over and over and over again, and um, and I'm feeling the pressure of not really being able to afford it. The last most important factor here is the debt that I incurred. Not like financial debt, though I do have that, but I'm talking more about uh, vehicular debt, and that is if you own and drive a car for 5 years without doing anything at all to it, uh, you're driving a ticking time bomb. Things are going to start breaking. You're going to have to start maintaining it. And that's kind of what happened to me. When my old garage was falling apart, being torn down, and this new garage was being planned, and I was being screwed by somebody, and all of the delays that came with the actual construction of my garage, I racked up a lot of debt on my cars. Now that I have a place to work on it, it's time to do this work. So that's really the reality that I have to just embrace. The next thing that I ran into was this kind of feeling of panic, and the ambition of having this garage kind of clouded my judgment a little bit, in the sense that I wanted to start getting to work. I wanted to get things taken apart, ready to go for the new parts before they came in, so I could get this car back together as quick as possible. Except there's one thing I didn't realize, and that's manufacturing delays. I ordered bushings to do all the bushings in this car, and I thought, well, since I got to take out the axle, separate the ball joint, I should take out the control arms, replace the bushings, and all that stuff. Well, I ordered the bushings, and guess what? They're not going to be until October because of manufacturing delays, thanks to this little thing that we got going around. Which brings me to my last lesson for the day, and that is, don't listen to people on the internet. Don't listen to me. Don't do what I tell you to do. Learn from me in that you're going to learn from the mistakes I make. Learn from me in that maybe you'll see that I put it together a certain way and you think you can do it better. Do better than me. Don't do what I do. Do better than me. And the reason I say this is because when it came to this control arm, I had actually been looking to replace my control arm bushings for about 20 years. Like literally, I had heard 20 years ago that this is one of the best things you could do to your car. And I've done some pretty great things to the suspension of this car. So I had 20 years of people on the internet telling me how to remove bushings. The one thing I did not do is get a blowtorch. And at this point, as much as I want to entertain you guys, I'm just done. I'm just done. After I ruined the control arm, it all became so clear to me. Why don't I just take it to the machine shop? Go figure. In the 20 years that I've been looking to do this project, that never once came to mind. That's because I was reading the forums. So yeah, read the forums, but do better. Finally, getting close to a resolution to this failed project. Today I received from Rock Auto a new tie rod end and a new upper ball joint. These are the two items that were a little bit wrecked when I took it apart. The upper ball joint had some play in it as I was trying to take it apart, and the tie rod end, the boot tore. But the cool thing is the new tie rod end has a ring clip on it. So I can replace this boot all day long. That's pretty damn cool. For the lower ball joint, since I'm going to be taking this apart again, hopefully someday soon, to actually do the bushings for the lower control arm. I didn't damage the ball joint boot at all. The rubber was still nice and soft, and it didn't appear to be cracked. So I just put it right back on for now. I'm sure it'll survive, at least for a while longer. I'm not going to worry about repacking it or anything, just because it was fine the way it was. So I'm going to put everything back together, just like this. I have to put the brake back on, and then I can put the wheel on and put the car down, tighten up the axle nut, and take apart the other side. I've been so pissed off with this car that I almost forgot to record a video. The $160 tool that I used to separate the ball joint without ruining the ball joint ruined the ball joint. So that was fun. Next up, I've got down here. See these two bolts at the bottom of the distribution shaft, where that greasy hole is? That's gross. Those two bolts are spinning freely. So I also have to retap those holes so that I can put bolts in there. There's only one bolt holding my distribution shaft on. That sounds really safe. So I gotta fix that. I also have to fix that. I might just throw a castle nut on there and just accept whatever happens. You know, honestly, if I have to replace the ball joint later on, that's what I'm gonna do. And I've been having the time of my life trying to put this axle CV shaft in. I did retap these holes again. I realized that the bolts that I was using when I initially tried to retap it were too small, which is why they didn't grab. So that makes a whole lot of sense. I used this tap. I am going to take this tap with me to the hardware store and buy new bolts that I know will fit this tap. I have an old bolt with me to know how long it was, and I'm going to see if I can replace these two bolts. And whatever size those bolts end up being, I may have to drill these out a little bit, but that's no big deal because it's not on the car. You know what I hate about these transmission caps is these washers. These are crush washers, so you're not supposed to reuse them, but there's a problem with that. And that problem is that parts houses don't carry this. They only carry drain plug washers, and you're buying one drain plug washer out of some weird assorted set for like $6. So I can't find this anywhere. I'm gonna have to reuse this. I'm gonna flip it over so that, I don't know, maybe I'll get a seal, and then I'll just order some more online and I'll replace it later. I'm gonna be honest, this is a little bit nerve-wracking. This is several months worth of work, and I'm going out on yet another test drive, and hopefully this car won't break down again. Okay, first thing is the battery is weak. When I come back, I'll hook it up to the battery tender. Belt squealed. I don't care anymore. I'm over that. I've tried readjusting that belt so many damn times. I'm just gonna live with it. I did all this work, and my reward for it is for the car to run exactly like it did for the past 30 years. And to be perfectly honest, I'm getting kind of tired of that. Like, it makes me not want to work on this car because it's a pain in the ass. It just becomes a pain in the ass. If I'm gonna put a bunch of time and money and effort into something that's supposed to be fun, like a hobby, I want some benefit out of it. Like, I want it to be better than it was. And that really got me thinking just about what I really want for the future of this car, and consequently my channel, my content. And I think because considering how hard it is to find parts for this car, I really wasn't expecting that to happen until I started doing a huge amount of work. I hadn't done a huge amount of work on this car in a long time, but it's getting pretty hard to find parts for this car now. And that kind of got me to thinking that maybe I should start thinking about a retirement plan for this car. And no, that's not to say that I'm gonna suspend registration and cancel insurance and just have it sit around and be a piece of furniture. No, it just means that I want this car to be something that I only take out for fun, and when I need to go from point A to point B, it's not my first choice. I don't want to have to rely on this car unless my primary car is broken down. So that means I need something that's reliable, cheap, fuel efficient, easy to work on, something I can maintain without hating myself. And for now, I think that's going to be the Miata. But that brought me to kind of another revelation that I had working on this car just this past time around. And that is, like I said, I want there to be a benefit when I put effort into this car. I want to have fun with it. I want this to be fun. I want the time and effort and money that I spent on this car to be rewarding. And something I've wanted to do for decades, or not decades, plural, a decade and a half, is an H22 swap. I've wanted to do that for a very long time on this car. So much so that I purchased used H22 blocks, 2 of them, 2 heads, an intake manifold, exhaust manifold, and a transmission from various H22 Preludes. And over the years, I've learned that it's better to play by the rules. So one of the requirements for this swap is that it be California smog legal, which means that I need to have all of the emission systems, I need to pass smog, I need to go to an inspection station, have it signed off, and that means that I need to have all of the emissions sorted out for this car from the donor vehicle. Now, the blocks that I have, the 2 engine blocks that I have, are stamped with H22A4. And that means that they're from a 97 Honda Prelude. That's a little bit of a problem because the wiring on this car is OBD0. My computer communicates with a flashing light. There's no plugs or anything for it. And that means that in order to use a 97 Prelude, I would need to convert to an OBD2 wiring harness. And that means that I would need to have an evap system, and I probably even need to switch out the gas tank. And that's a real problem because that's just an enormous amount of work that isn't worth it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if this car were a 92 to 95 Prelude, and if it already had an H22A1 engine instead of a B20A5, that would count as being a replacement engine, which means the replacement engine, as long as it's the same family as the original motor, you could swap that in. So if this were a 92-95 with an H22A1, I could use that H22A4, no problem. The same goes for if I were to use a B20A from Japan in this motor, to replace this motor. Because the original motor for this car is a B20A5. So this is where it gets a little weird. If I were to buy a 92-95 Prelude with an H22A1 engine, I could swap in the H22A4 that I have on the engine stand here, and then use that H22A1, put that in this car, and then I could use the emission systems that are designed for the 92-95 Prelude, which is widely supported by the community, both in Prelude Power and elsewhere. There's mounts for this thing, there's wiring harnesses, there's everything you need to do a legal swap for this car if it's an H22A1 from a 92 to 96 Prelude. So that's kind of going to be the future for this car. That means I'm buying another car. That means I'm buying another Prelude. It also gives me some direction with this Miata project. I've been struggling to figure out if I wanted to track it, build this car up to be a really sick car, or if I wanted to build it back up to be a nice stock build. And I think that's going to be my answer. Because anybody that wants to build a Miata has specific plans for that car. And I'd kind of be stupid to try to anticipate that. My best bet is to make that car a nice stock example of a sorted car, sell it, and use that money to buy a 4th generation Prelude with the VTEC H22A1, so that I can do that swap and then do this swap. And that sounds like a whole lot of time and money and effort and YouTube content. So for now, I think this car is in good shape. There's no rattles, nothing is going too crazy. I'm smelling a little bit of oils, but it's kind of normal. Because I've been doing work that involves draining oil. So let's get this back into the garage and check for leaks. And if I am leaking, well, it's probably that drain plug washer that I am reusing. So that's all I've got for you. Probably going to be seeing a lot more Miata content and a little bit less Prelude content, because I think, barring more disasters, I think this car is in good shape for a while until I do this motor swap. And you have more Prelude content to look forward to. It just might be a different Prelude. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this.